Hello to all of my friends at Stevivor.com. It's me, Mario. You guys, number one.
Hey Stevivor listeners, it's Eleni here, and I'm very excited to announce that I've got an awesome interview coming right up for you all. I got the chance to interview Lisy Kane, who works at League of Geeks and is also one of the co-founders of Girl Geek Academy, and we had an amazing chat about all things games, how to get into gaming development, as well as looking at women in the STEM fields and how we can be encouraging women to get into these fields and the work that is already being done. So check it out and enjoy.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Very excited to talk about all things games, particularly women in games. But just to start off with, for the listeners, do you mind telling me a bit about yourself, what you do in the games industry, and just introduce yourself?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name's Lisy Kane, and currently I'm a production director at a local Melbourne indie studio called League of Geeks. And I also co-founded a company called Girl Geek Academy, and we're an organization like the for good startup that are aiming to try and get more women and girls and non-binary folk into STEM. So all things STEM, so not just games. Obviously, with my experience, I look after a lot of the games-related content there. So I wear two hats, mainly in the industry, and also obviously an avid gamer myself. Love playing games in my spare time, but generally speaking, a lot of managing and project management and working with an amazing team that we have at League of Geeks. So that's my main day job, is wrangling those folks. But when I do get spare time, working with Girl Geek as well.
Yeah, lovely. And you touched on what you do, which is something I really want to talk about a bit more later because you do some amazing work. But I always love to ask, I think particularly with women, it's always interesting to find out how they even got into games. I know for me personally, I credit most of it to my older brother, stealing the PlayStation 1 when he wasn't playing, playing whatever I could when he wasn't looking. So I'd love to hear what was your experience getting into video games.
Oh, that's so great. The PlayStation 1, an iconic console. It's such a good one. So for gaming itself, I have been playing since I was very, very young. We always had, my parents they ran their own business, so they were really into technology, and they needed computers obviously back in the day to start doing very, very basic invoicing. It was a Honeywell laptop that we had, like a really old school orange and black Honeywell laptop, and I would just tinker because I'd go to my parents' shop after work and they had 2 games on there. They had Commander Keen on there, and I'd play that, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then PlayStation 1 was definitely one of the first consoles that I also had. My dad got it for the family, and it was, me and my little sister, we just played after school, and then eventually we got a computer, and then things like Age of Empires and The Sims, and it's really funny thinking about games back then versus now. Like, we only ever had like 1 or 2 games to play, and we were totally happy with that. And now my Steam playlist is just like out of control. But that was really what got me into playing games. I've always played games since I was a little kid, but getting into the actual industry itself, that was something that took a while. Like, I had no idea, even though ironically in Brisbane, where I'm from at the time, there was heaps of game developers working in Brisbane. I had absolutely no idea. I was so blind to it because I just didn't understand that was an industry that I could work in. So I actually didn't get into game development until I flunked out of 2 uni courses. Well, I didn't flunk out, I just didn't enjoy them. So I started a film and TV degree, and I thought that was because I've always been very creative. So I thought that's it for me. And I didn't really vibe with it. So I dropped out. And I'd done a TAFE course as well in business, and that really didn't vibe with me either. And third time round, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I want to do with my life. I need to figure out what's exciting to me. Otherwise, I'm just going to work at a bank for the rest of my life, which is also obviously fine. But I really wanted to find something that I would enjoy and love and want to spend, 40 hours a week doing. And in Brisbane at QUT, the university I ended up going to, they had a game development degree. And I was like, that moment, those little moments that you have, I read the description. I was like, what? No one was telling me people could do this. So that was it. From that day, I was like, okay, I'm in. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I, enrolled, did that, had lots of great opportunities through QUT. And then the rest is history, as they say. That was the moment. It took, 20, 23, 24 years to realize I could even work in the industry. And that's obviously why I do what I do now, because I think about if I'd known when I was 15 or 14 what my career would look like now. So yeah, that's the abridged version of my failures and exciting times to get into the games industry.
No, but I really love that, because I think it's one of those careers. I think there's a really big misconception that it's something that you can't really turn into a full-time career, or there's also that misconception of like, well, it's not even a real job. So I really love you telling that story, and that, it is a journey to really get there. And I think, for me wanting to get into games journalism, it's also that thing of realizing that it is a real job, it is a real career, it's a booming industry. And it's definitely a really exciting time to get into the games industry. And speaking of games industry, you mentioned before League of Geeks and all the cool work you do there. I'd love for you to sort of touch on the role you have there. And with Armello in particular, I know that game sort of became really big and really boomed. I read that you did a bit of work making sure that it, was ready for like international release and stuff like that. So I'd love for you to touch on sort of the journey of working on that game.
Yeah, so I ironically, when I was at uni, I very quickly realized there's a few different tracks that you can go into with game development, and the track that spoke to me instantly was production. It was something like, I remember having a Facebook memory going, one day when I grow up, I'm going to be a producer at Rockstar Games. Like it spoke to me very instantly, just because the way my brain works. And in order to build a portfolio for a producer, it's really, really hard to do. It's something that's like, how do you prove that you're good at organizing things and all that kind of stuff? So I knew I would have to have a few different skills, and games journalism was one that actually I started off doing in the very beginning, because I knew I would have to have really good writing skills and communication skills. So I actually did a lot of interning as well when I was in university, doing tech writing and all that kind of stuff, because I really wanted to make sure that when I applied for jobs, I would be able to instantly say what I was good at and actually have a portfolio. And if you Google my name, you can find me. And it's a lot of the thing with the industry is about, what's your portfolio? What have you built? What have you done? And production, a lot of the time, you usually have to be in an industry or be in a company in order to be promoted to a producer. That's one track to get into it. But I was very fortunate at the time when I moved to Melbourne. The League of Geeks team were just about to go into early access, and they were working on bringing Armello to Steam. And I had done, during my uni days, I'd done an internship at a studio in Brisbane called Defiant Development, and I'd helped them with their Kickstarter launch. So that was a studio that League of Geeks are very, very close with. And basically, because of that experience, and also my project management experience, not in game, so I did a lot of project management in tech, I was able to go, hey, these are all the skills I have. Please take a chance on me as an associate producer. And ironically, they were already going to reach out to me because of my connection with the studio in Brisbane. So I applied for that job and got that job. So I started off being an associate producer and a community manager because of that writing skill set that I had. And really from there, during the Armello days, it was about figuring out, finding my feet. As an associate producer, you're not really trusted to do the whole project. I was there to support the lead producer, which was Trent Custers at the time. And I was really just supporting him to make sure he shipped the game and for an international release. So a lot of every little thing that you could imagine with a game's release. And then from there, just realized that production was definitely what I wanted to do. And slowly but surely dropped off the community management side of things and handed that over to someone else, and have continuously just figured out, what do I want to do? What do I want to focus on? What's good, what I'm good at. And working at a company like League of Geeks is so awesome, because we are a small studio. We have the flexibility for me to go, I'm really good at this. I'm not great at this. I'm going to focus on this, and we should hire for these skill sets. Or this is what I want my career to be, so let's focus on that. And I've been very lucky to have the support of the founders there to allow me to do that. So I've gone from, associate producer, lead producer, production director. So, but generally speaking, my day is just like herding cats. I think a lot of producers will explain it that same way. It's just like, you can set your agenda for the day. I'm like, I'm going to get all these things done today. And by the end of the day, you've done other things, but it was not what you intended on doing. So it's good for my brain. My brain is brain is a bag of cats. So really much aligns with what I like doing and how I work.
Oh, I think, well, what more could you ask for? Exactly. And something I'd love to hear, your thoughts on is when we think about women in games, I think typically the discussion's really tailored towards, the bigger companies like, those companies in the US, in the UK. And I think that there's not a lot of discussion about women in games in the Australian gaming development scene and the Australian gaming industry. So I'd really love to sort of hear your thoughts and experiences as a woman who's really done the circuit in the Australian gaming scene.
I think we have a very unique ecosystem in that we have the industry in Australia is new and old in the same vein. So we have a very established industry that unfortunately had a big collapse during the global financial crisis. So we did lose a lot of talent overseas. But what we ended up seeing was a bunch of more small studios like League of Geeks and a bunch of other studios formed because of that glut of that removal of everything. And the American games industry is obviously very entrenched in these 20-something year old studios. So Australia actually had a really unique opportunity to understand diversity in a very different way and have opportunities to talk about it in a very different way. On top of that, we also have in Australia, we have government organizations that are super passionate about it as well. So Film Victoria, so I'm obviously based in Melbourne, but Film Victoria and a bunch of other government organizations really have seen and understood that this needs to change and the discussion needs to be improved. So a lot of the work that I've done for the games industry has been alongside Film Victoria because they recognize that have a huge experience doing this stuff in film. So they do it obviously in the screen industry. They've seen this very similar thing there as well. Like there's a big lack of female directors in film. So it's not too dissimilar in games as well. So they've applied a lot of their learnings from that to here. So one example of that, in my career, I needed to skill up really quickly with what I was doing at League of Geeks. And at that point in time, I didn't really have a lot of mentors in Australia for production. So I really knew I needed to skill up really quickly. And Film Victoria actually offered a fellowship program back in 2017 for women and non-binary folk to increase their, basically fast track their careers because they really saw a gap of senior women and non-binary folk in the industry. But yeah, so we have a very unique position, but unfortunately, the problem still stands. The problem still does stand that we do have, we have on average higher, I think, than the global average. I think we're sitting around 18-20% in comparison to like 15% of non-men in the industry, but we still have a long ways to go. I feel like we do have a bubble here in Australia that we have cared about ever since I've joined the industry. It's been a part of the conversation. So hopefully that means that we have that unique position to continue to see it work. And obviously now the conversations on the international scale, it has been for a long time, but it's obviously in the court systems now. So it's a very different story. You can't really deny it anymore that it's happening. So we definitely are in a very different situation here in Australia, but the challenges are still the same at the end of the day.
You touch on sort of those challenges and how, yes, internationally, you look at a company like Blizzard and everything that's going on there. And obviously that's quite a sensitive topic that I don't particularly want to get into. But one thing from that I've found really interesting is some of the language that's been used, particularly things like, this idea of the video game industry, particularly internationally, having this frat boy culture and this rock star mentality. And so, without really touching on, obviously, sort of the more sensitive matter of that, I would like to hear sort of your thoughts, I guess, on looking at the gaming culture at large. Do you think that maybe there's a more male-dominated aspect to the community? And I guess, what are some ways you think we can overcome that? Like for me personally, I think that maybe the culture is something that really needs to be rebuilt from the ground up. As a young woman who always loved games, I definitely felt that at times, my male peers, there was this mentality that, well, you're a girl, why are you playing games? So I guess even looking at younger women, what sorts of things do you think need to change in order to make the gaming space a more inclusive space for women, like you said, non-binary, minorities in general? What do you think really needs to be done?
It's really interesting. It was funny. There was this Twitter thread the other day about photos of LAN parties back in like the early 2000s, late 90s. And I went and found some old photos of my LAN parties that I went to, and I was the only woman in them. And they're just disgusting. Milk crates, these tiny little TVs. I don't even know how we played with them. Just like filthy apartments. Like it was, but it was really fun. But yeah, I was the only woman in the group that would come and play games with my friends. But it's interesting, the idea of how game makers actually change the game culture as well, the general gaming culture. So as a great example with Armello, we knew Armello is not a game we'd go like, it's not a Call of Duty, it's not a CSGO, it's not a game that inherently has that frat boy culture. It's a cute turn-based strategy game with animals, but there is still that element of the entitled gamer, as we call them, quote unquote, entitled gamer, that we knew with a strategy game still comes with that domain. Strategy games, it's my preferred bread and butter of type of game, but there's that weird elitism when it comes to games. So it's a different type of frat boy. But we knew that was a culture we didn't want to enforce within our own community of players. So it was something that we set out at the beginning. We were like, okay, we have this policy of, as a community manager, you have full autonomy to just ban people from the community if they are, any of the isms, racist, any racism, sexism, all that kind of stuff. If you feel uncomfortable, ban them. And what we ended up seeing is a learned culture. We saw our players self-censoring. So we are in the Australian time zone, and most of our players are in America. So the moment we knew we were doing the right thing is you'd wake up and be like, actually reported, you see reported posts come through of other community members, and you'd see community members jump in on our behalf and be like, actually, the developers don't like that kind of, you should watch your language. This is not the space for this. And it meant that we could create this really awesome space for these players. And Trent, one of the founders at Log, he's like, I don't want those people playing our games. Like, I don't care about the money. I don't want that subsection of the gamers playing our game. And it was really, we talk about it sometimes about like, how do we make that space the space that we all want to play games in? So that's our company, and that's what we do. And we're seeing companies like Blizzard, and we are seeing people start to do that. So that's one, great way of, discouraging that behavior. On the flip side, we're also seeing, amazing non-traditional game makers, so women, non-binary, all these different stories being told, and these small like cozy games coming out. And the reaction to those at the moment has been, what is this game? Why is Game Informer covering this game? I just want to learn about this other game. So we're seeing, the gamers being confused about all these new types of games coming out. So I really think the more we flood the industry with all different types of like games and content, there's going to be a shift. We already know that it isn't just men playing video games. We already know the statistic is actually 50-50. So there's an audience out there. So the more we see, more diverse games coming out, drowning out the minority voice of these quote unquote angry gamers, I think, making sure that behavior and saying that behavior is not right. And, it's easy to do that. But unfortunately, it's easy to say that, but it's such a societal thing, right? It's not going to be one small thing that does it. It's going to be a group of all these different things that I've just talked about. That's why it's so difficult. Like when we started Girl Geek, I was like, oh, we'll start this company and we'll be done in 5 years. Like the industry's going to change. Like I was like, I could already see, people talk to me and they're like, oh yeah, we really care about this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I would love if we can just shut this company down because this problem solved. 5-7 years on, the problem is maybe even worse. I don't even know anymore. Like it's not one thing that's ever going to fix this problem. It's just, there's just so many layers to it, and it's so hard. But yeah.
No, absolutely. And I'm really glad that you brought up Girl Geek Academy, because it's something I definitely want to touch on, because I think it's amazing work that you do. And so I would really love to hear like what the inspiration behind wanting to be a co-founder for that was. And then also, I guess, what do you think is the importance of having those safe spaces for women who do want to pursue, a career or their interest in technology? Because like, as we've discussed, there's sort of misconceptions about women who want to get into those types of fields. So I really love that it's a really safe space for women. And so what was sort of the inspiration between making sure that women had that safe space?
Definitely. So the company was actually founded because I moved to Melbourne and I had a friend that I'd met when I was living in Brisbane. And I was like, Tammy, what's the lowdown with the startups in here? What's going on with tech? I want to make some friends. And she's like, hey, I'm running this hackathon. It's the first time I've run a hackathon before. Come along and see what it's about. And I'd been studying games, so I knew what a hackathon was. I'd been working at a big bank in their tech section for a while before that. So I understood what a hackathon was. So I came along and just attended and everything. And it ended up being what we found later to be the first all-women's hackathon run anywhere. And we had, I think, 100 people attend, and awesome, really, really fun, great weekend, very supportive. It was not a traditional hackathon. We all went home at 9-10 p.m. came back in at 9 a.m. the next day. Like, we didn't sleep there. We didn't like stay up all night for 4 days, all that kind of stuff. We had really healthy food. It was really, really fun. And after that, Tammy kind of like handpicked a bunch of her friends and got us together and was like, okay, that was really successful. Like, what would that look like if we keep doing that? And by the end of that hackathon, she was like, haha, I just got us at ABN. We're starting a company now. And it was really a response because Tammy had been in the tech sector for a while now, and she'd been going to these hackathons, and she'd been the only woman. She, pizza, soft drinks. She's an amazing fitness person as well. And she's like, I don't want that. I want to run something cool. And Tammy and I think 3 of 5 of the co-founders of Girl Geek, we've all come up through like the punk or hardcore scene. So we've all come up through very DIY routes of like running gigs, putting on shows, like all that kind of stuff. So for us to put a hackathon on, for her to put a hackathon on was very natural. It was just like, okay, this is easy. You just find a couple of sponsors, find a venue, blah, blah, blah. And I was the same. I'd come from, running gigs, putting on festivals, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, this is easy. And then essentially that was really the precipice of starting Girl Geek, is bringing some people together to become friends. We became incredibly good friends with my co-founders. Like, I didn't know any of them before. I didn't meet Sarah, who's now our CEO, for like, I think a year, until she was in Brisbane still. So she moved back down to Melbourne. And we really just were responding to what the industry needed at the time. So what we really do is every year we sit down and go, okay, what's happening in our various industries? What do we need to respond to? So we went from really running these bespoke one-off events to really starting to look at overall inspiration and motivation to try and get and retain more women into the industry. So, and that is from the very beginning of that journey. So primary school all the way up to, career changes and moving into CEO positions. So we've done so many different things as every year changes, but really what we want to do is figure out how to, bolster the girl gangs and bolster all these different groups and communities so people do feel confident to continue their careers or figure out if they want to join the industry. So yeah, we've run so many different types of events. We've brought out a book series with Penguin. The last big event, obviously the last couple of years has been a bit hard to run events, but the last big initiative we ran was with Film Victoria, and it was a career incubator for games. And it was about, similar to what I went through, but on a much bigger scale, working with people in their early stages of their career and going, okay, what are the questions that they didn't answer in university? What were the things? And this was all based off what I knew was hard for me in my first few years in the industry. Like, if I didn't have someone like Sarah to talk to, great support in my own company, I would have been so confused of like, how do I do my tax? How do I build a website to promote my own personal brand? Is Twitter the best place to do that? Like, all this kind of stuff. How do you build a good CV? Like, all these questions that they don't really teach you in university. And when you're in the industry, no one really teaches that to people that, you don't get told that by your boss or by, the boardroom, because, you're just starting off, you're junior. And the only way you would ever know that is by that community of people, which is often, men have their community. Men have a very, very tight-knit community within the games industry and tech sector broadly. They have their Rolodex. And being a minority group, we don't have that. So building that up so they know who they can talk to, they know who they can ask. And it was awesome and really, really successful. We saw a lot of great success out of it. A lot of folks going and getting Film Vic grants to start games companies. We saw promotions, we saw pay rises. The pay rise one's always great because it's like, how do you ask for a pay rise? I don't know. When should you ask for a pay rise? And, we talked about those things that are kind of awkward in companies, and some companies are like, oh, don't ask about that. Don't talk to me about that, especially being an underrepresented person, you might get, turned away, or like being like, just wait your turn, or just, all that kind of stuff, all those languages. So it's been a really wild journey. We're still figuring out how to continue on right now, because a lot of our strength has been around physical communities and being together. And it's something that I'm really nervous about, because I haven't had that for a long time. And that's Girl Geek.
Yeah, well, and as I said, it's such amazing work that you guys do, and it's really lovely to see a community like that, particularly in Australia. I think it's really lovely. It makes me really happy. And yeah, what do you think? What do you think's next for you guys, or even you personally? What are you hoping to achieve in your personal career, or even with Girl Geek in the next coming years? What's sort of the trajectory ahead for you?
You know what? It's so funny. It's a really hard question now. It's everything is so up in the air. I'm constantly trying to think about what we can do to support folks, because the problem that I'm facing right now, and I'm sure you can understand this, I'm exhausted. I'm so exhausted. I'm exhausted. I support, being in my role, a lot of my job is supporting the mental health and the well-being of my team at my day-to-day job, and dealing with the fact that we're all working remotely trying to create a creative product. It's incredibly difficult. And at the end of the day, I don't have the energy. I don't have any more energy to give. And it really, really upsets me, because I just, like, obviously I want to continue to help people and support people, but it's the classic, when you're on an airplane, they say, put your mask on before you mask up others. We've been doing a lot of self-care within the Girl Geek community at the moment, making sure that we're okay, because we haven't really been. It's been really, really tough time. We've got one of our co-founders, she's been in America, so she lives in the States. So usually we would actually connect in person once a year to actually meet up and strategize and all that stuff. And obviously we haven't been able to do that in years. We've had another co-founder, our CEO, move between Brisbane and Melbourne because of lockdowns and everything. And it's just so hard. So for Girl Geek, I honestly don't know. And we've been doing small projects. So we've been working with Sunsilk, doing a program with them, and we've done a program with Microsoft. So we have been taking on small initiatives when we can, but it's just honestly been a kind of, we're just waiting to see what's happening, and also what the aftermath of all of this has been for the industry, because I have my concerns that, going work from home, and with companies having these, the games industry is booming in regards to players, but it's really, really hard to run studios from home, and it's really, really scary to form companies from home. So, and unfortunately as well, underrepresented folks, especially women, are often the first to become primary caregivers. So with, childcare is closing a lot of the time, schools closing, I'm really concerned that the aftermath that we're going to have to, quote unquote, help clean up with the rest of the community is that we'll see a lot of folks leave the industry because it's not safe right now. And the games industry is tumultuous at the best of times, but when you're, a hit-driven industry, and you're all working from home, and you got to look after kids and all that stuff, I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see a downtrend of people leaving the industry, and the downtrend of underrepresented folks in the industry because of everything that's going on right now. So that's going to be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen there. But as for League of Geeks, on the flip side, while it's really, really hard, we're doing great in regards to projects. So it's like, it is one of those things that's interesting, because we are an established studio. We're working on new projects. It's really, really exciting, but it's also just generally exhausting and difficult. And we're continuing to be, do our best to make sure we're building a diverse team. So we have around 40% non-male developers in our studio, which is well and truly above the average, but something that we continue to look at. But it is something we're seeing even at League of Geeks. People are making different career changes. There's a great article that was published recently about Microsoft called The Great Resignation, where companies like Microsoft, they're interviewing their teams, and I think they said 41% of their team were thinking about leaving in the next 6 months. And, Microsoft's an awesome company. Like, a lot of folks would want to work there. Microsoft includes Xbox, includes various different organizations. And it's because the world has completely changed. And if you're at home working 9 to 5 every single day, it's really, really hard to find the joy in that at the moment. So a lot of people are changing industries rapidly, or like finding different alternative ways of making income, because it's just so hard. And I totally understand that. It's just like it's really, really hard to keep on, making great games when, we're stuck in this little rat cage of an apartment, which I am at the moment. So yeah, I don't know. I honestly, 2 years ago, I could have answered you and be like, we're going to do this and it's going to be awesome and all these other initiatives. But I'm not sure. I'm really, really not sure. Hopefully next year we'll be able to take stock and figure out what we can do next. But yeah, it's so hard. It's a non-answer answer.
No, but like you said, things are constantly changing. I know like in my own personal life, I've really given up with having future plans, because I feel like every time I have a future plan, then something happens, particularly, with Melbourne and lockdown and COVID. It's something that, it's always hard to really know what's going to happen. But I guess the flip side is it means that being in lockdown is a good time to play lots of video games. So before we wrap up, I'd sort of love to hear, have you been playing anything fun lately? Any good game recommendations you've got that you'd want to share?
So yeah, I play a lot of Dota 2. That's what I mainly play. And if I have the energy, I've been playing Pokemon Unite, which is ironically just another mobile. Which is really fun. I've really been enjoying that. I want to check out Lake, which is the new game about you play a young woman as a postal worker, like delivering mail. I think that sounds really nice in this day and age. I think we need some coziness, so I want to check out that. And I'm also going to replay, I think even today, a game called Wilmot's Warehouse. And the reason is I played it when it first came out and it was really great. It's a game about I'm a producer. It's a game about organizing, and you basically you're in a big warehouse and you have to organize these different cubes and deliver orders. And I played it when it first came out, but Limmy, who's a Twitch streamer, one of my favorite, I've been watching him almost every night because he's so funny. And he was playing Wilmot's again. I was like, I really should replay that game. So that's the next game I want to go and come back to, because I never really finished, quote unquote, finished it or got into it as much as I should have. But watching his streams playing, I'm like, yeah, I want to check that out. I wonder what other new games. Oh, the next game I'm very, very excited about, that's not coming out from next year, which I'm very excited about, is 2 Point University. Massive fan of the 2 Point series. All the games I play are either MOBAs or producer-based, like organizational series.
I was about to say that.
I have a problem.
All of these games are like packing and delivering and organizing.
I know. I made this joke about 2 Point Hospital because I was replaying it recently. I was like, love to log off from organizing people to log back on and organize more people. It's really, but it's just how my brain works. It's that, just give me those little bits of serotonin. It's what I crave. So yeah, that's it. That's what I'm playing.
No, and I feel like especially in like, a time that we're living in where everything's out of our control, sometimes it's nice to just have those little moments of control, even if it is in the form of a video game. I absolutely respect that. And just before we wrap up, like I said, thank you so much for speaking with me. It's been amazing and you do so much great work. Is there anything you just want to add lastly before we wrap up for the day?
League of Geeks are always hiring. Please come work with us. That's the only thing I will say. leagueofgeeks.com/careers. We're looking for engineers right now. I can tell you that there'll be some art roles up soon. But we are hiring again. We took a little bit of a break during lockdown and everything, but we're back at it. So come work with us. But it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time at the moment in the games industry. There's lots of stuff going on, and it's just really hard. I think the biggest thing is just everyone needs to take care of themselves and be nice to each other. Be nice to your local game developers. They're all doing it really tough. We're all doing it tough. But yes, that's it.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, like I said, thank you so much for chatting with me, and yeah, good luck for everything you do in the future.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.